Washington, D.C. had witnessed numerous political scandals, corruption, bribery, and cover-ups. But this case was different. This wasn't a Senate hearing. It was a courtroom. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wasn't just a politician defending her views. She was a defendant in a criminal case. The halls of the federal courthouse buzzed with excitement. Protesters stood outside, some chanting in support of AOC, while others demanded her imprisonment. Inside, journalists filled the seats, cameras ready, notepads out. This was no ordinary trial. It was a political spectacle of the highest order. AOC stepped out of the black SUV, her face emotionless, but the weight of the moment was clear. Dressed in a navy blazer, she looked every bit the fighter her supporters believed her to be. But this time, the fight was not on Capitol Hill. It was in a court of law. On the prosecution side sat Pam Bondi, the tenacious former Attorney General, now a federal prosecutor. She wasn't here for drama. She was here to win. Sitting beside her was Caroline Leavitt, a rising star in conservative media, ensuring the public narrative swayed in Bondi's favor. While Bondi prepared for the battle ahead, Leavitt worked the media, making sure the court of public opinion was already turning against AOC. The judge entered, a seasoned man known for his impartiality, though he had little tolerance for political games. He tapped his gavel. "Court is now in session," he said. Pam Bondi stood first, her voice firm and commanding. "Your Honor, the government brings charges against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to help individuals evade federal law enforcement." She paused. "The evidence will show that the defendant didn't just advocate for immigration reform. She encouraged illegal immigrants to ignore lawful orders and evade deportation." A murmur spread through the gallery, but AOC stayed calm, her face neutral. Bondi continued, "This is not about politics. This is about the law. No one is above it. Not a senator, not a congresswoman, and certainly not someone who claims to be a champion of justice." Bondi sat, and the room's tension thickened. AOC's lawyer, James Calloway, stood up next. His voice was steady and measured, contrasting Bondi's sharp tone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution will try to paint my client as a criminal. They'll try to convince you that standing up for people's rights is a crime. But let's be clear. Representative Ocasio-Cortez did nothing more than educate individuals about their constitutional rights. That is not obstruction. That is democracy." He turned to the jury. "If the government can prosecute someone for informing people about their rights, where does it stop? Will lawyers be arrested for advising clients? Will journalists be jailed for reporting on constitutional rights? Today, you aren't just deciding my client's fate. You're deciding the limits of free speech itself." AOC exhaled slowly. The judge looked at the room. "The prosecution may call its first witness." Bondi stood. "The government calls Special Agent Daniel Briggs." A tall, broad-shouldered man walked to the stand, his face expressionless as he took the oath. "Agent Briggs, can you explain your role in immigration enforcement?" Bondi asked. Briggs nodded. "I oversee operations targeting high-priority deportation cases. My unit specializes in locating individuals with outstanding removal orders." Bondi pulled a thick folder from the evidence table. "Were you involved in operations affected by the defendant's actions?" she asked. "Yes," Briggs replied. "During a raid targeting a known felon with an active deportation order, our agents arrived at the residence. We knew he was inside, but he refused to open the door. He was seen on his phone reading from a document." Bondi turned to the jury. "And what was this document?" Briggs's jaw tightened. It was a step-by-step guide on how to avoid ICE. It was part of a Know Your Rights pamphlet distributed by Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office. A hush fell over the room. Bondi continued. So, you're telling us that the defendant's materials directly contributed to this target evading federal authorities? Yes, Briggs confirmed. Not just that night. Since the materials started circulating, we've seen a noticeable increase in resistance during enforcement operations. Bondi let the weight of his words settle before speaking again. No further questions. Calloway rose smoothly. Agent Briggs, you've worked in law enforcement for how many years? 15, Briggs answered. Calloway nodded. And in those 15 years, are you aware that the Fourth Amendment protects individuals from unlawful searches and seizures? Yes, Briggs replied hesitantly. Calloway stepped closer. Did your team have a judicial warrant to enter the residence? Briggs's jaw tightened. No, it was an administrative order. Calloway spread his hands. So let's be clear. The individual exercised his legal right to refuse entry to law enforcement without a judicial warrant, correct? Technically, yes, Briggs admitted. Calloway turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the government wants you to believe that my client obstructed justice, but in reality, she simply told people the truth. If law enforcement does not have a judicial warrant, they cannot enter your home. That is not obstruction. That is the law. He faced Briggs again. One last question. Did Representative Ocasio-Cortez ever tell anyone to resist arrest? Briggs exhaled sharply. Not explicitly. Calloway smiled slightly. Not explicitly or not at all? Briggs shifted in his seat. Not at all. Calloway turned back to the jury. No further questions. Bondi clenched her jaw, frustrated. The first round hadn't gone entirely her way, but she wasn't finished. The judge called for a recess. We will recess for lunch. Court will resume in 1 hour. As the room emptied, AOC exchanged a glance with Calloway. How bad was it? She whispered. Calloway smirked. Let's just say they took the first swing, but we're still standing. Across the room, Caroline Levitt leaned into Bondi. We need to hit harder. Bondi nodded, her gaze fixed on AOC. Oh, we will. This is just the beginning. After the recess, Bondi called her next witness. Officer Michael Reynolds took the stand, and soon, more testimony came pouring in, each one building the case against AOC. Bondi was relentless, but Calloway was no less skilled at defending her. Every move felt like a calculated battle for public perception. The fight for AOC's freedom was more than just a courtroom drama. It was a political fight that was being watched by millions, with the fate of her career on the line. And as the trial went on, the lines between law and politics blurred even further, making every word spoken in that courtroom a potential game changer. As the trial reached its climax, the stakes had never been higher. Both sides were exhausted, yet the battle was far from over. Pam Bondi had built a solid case, pushing forward with evidence that painted Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a key figure in obstructing federal law enforcement. However, James Calloway's relentless defense of AOC continually chipped away at Bondi's narrative, highlighting the fundamental rights of individuals and the dangerous precedent that could be set by prosecuting someone for educating the public about their constitutional protections. The courtroom was charged with tension, the media outside amplifying every moment. For AOC, this trial was not just about her legal future, but the very core of her political identity and values. Bondi's strategic attacks aimed to break her, while Calloway's defense was focused on preserving the integrity of free speech and the protection of civil rights. As the final moments of the trial approached, the weight of public opinion was beginning to shift. AOC and her team knew they were facing more than just legal charges. They were up against a fight for their place in the larger narrative of American democracy. The verdict, when it came, would not only decide AOC's fate, but also echo through the political landscape for years to come.